Good morning. Welcome to this Euractiv virtual conference titled The Sustainable Use of Pesticides Regulation, Navigating the Path to a Greener EU. I'm Julia Dahm. I'm an agri-food journalist at Euractiv, and I'll be moderating the discussion today. So over the past decades, pesticides have helped bring higher and more stable yields to the EU by protecting harvests from being damaged or even destroyed by pests. But on the other hand, they've also had a range of negative consequences on biodiversity, on the environment, on human health. So against this backdrop, and also as part of its sustainable food flagship policy, the Farm to Fork strategy, the European Commission has tabled a proposal for a revamped pesticides regulation. And among other things, this foresees an ambitious target of slashing both the use and the risk of pesticides in half across the EU by 2030. So since this proposal was published last summer, I think it's fair to say that it's made big waves and stoked a lot of controversy. So on the side of national governments in the EU, they've been far from pleased with the proposal. In December, the EU member states requested additional information on the impact of the legislation from the Commission, especially with a view to the impact on food production after the Ukraine war brought the question of food security back into the spotlight. And on the side of the European Parliament, the proposal has also been fiercely fought over, while the Greens spearhead the charge to keep up or to even increase the ambition of the proposal. The EPP has been kind of leading the group of those who say the proposal is unfeasible and will be harmful to food security. So to sum up, I think it's fair to say that there's a lot more difficult talks to be had until an agreement can be reached on this highly political file. And that's why I'm especially excited today to have the opportunity to discuss this with a range of very diverse panelists, let's say. So let's give a warm welcome to them. With us, we have, not quite yet, but very soon, Michelle Rivasi. She's a member of the European Parliament for the Greens, and she's also a member of the newly founded Subcommittee for Health in the European Parliament. Next up, we have Diana Lenzi. She's the president of the EU Young Farmers Association, SEJA, and also herself a young farmer in Tuscany. Also representing the farming side, we have Paula de Vera, senior policy advisor at Copa-Cogeca, the biggest EU agriculture umbrella organization. We have Martin Dermin, executive director of the Pesticide Action Network Europe, also known as PAN Europe. And last but not least, with us, we have Jennifer Lewis, Executive Director at the International Biocontrol Manufacturers Association. So Jennifer will be able to tell us a bit about what alternatives there are for plant protection. Okay, so let's jump right into it and hear from the panelists directly. As Michelle is not quite there yet, we'll start with Diana for your opening statement, please.
Good morning, Julia. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, first of all. I think it's very important to have this debate. I think the more we talk about it and the more we start taking out probably ideology, a little bit too much politics, and a little bit too much numerology from this very sensitive file, and the further actually we can proceed in something that I feel, both as president of SEJA, but also as a farmer myself, as a very important way of advancing in how we think farming for the future. I think that we are at a moment in time and in history when we can start doing some analysis on how we have gone about in plant protection. And we may start thinking about how we want to reshape and remodel the way we do plant protection. But again, I think that this is a debate that needs science to be the lead, because nonetheless, farmers need to be able to protect their crops in a time of rising challenges, may it be from climate change, may it be from the effects that climate change is also bringing in having numerous pests attacking our crops all over Europe. we do need the instruments that are necessary in order to ensure the health of our crops for our harvest, and therefore the food for our markets. This is the basis. This is what plant protection products are there for. So we can most definitely have a debate on what has been done wrong. Probably we have come from a chemical revolution that has put a lot of products on the market. Now we have a capacity to see in a greater depth the ones that are beneficials and the ones that have too many negative outputs. And on those, we can start looking at what we want to do to replace them. Because the one thing that we know we have to do is figure out replacement methods, because we still have to make sure that we are ensuring the health of our crops and of our harvests. So I'm very pleased that we are capable of being here together and having this debate and making sure that we depolarize this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. I'm pleased as well to be able to have this discussion. And I see that Michelle has arrived. Welcome, Michelle. Are you ready to give us your opening statement as well?
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well. Perfect. You can go ahead.
Okay, super. Oh, well, good day for all the members of this work. This regulation is very important now. You see, our rapporteur, Sarah Wiener, want to reduce the use of pesticide 50%, and we want to increase the organic way for the agriculture land. But for me, I have a subject, and it is very important for me. It's about the pesticide forbidden in Europe. I don't understand, and I explain to the Commission, I explain to the member of this Parliament, that we export 18,000 tons by year of pesticide forbidden in Europe, and we export that in Latin America, in Africa, and no problem at all. We protect the health of European citizens and not African health. And in Brazil, for instance, I think it's a country where there is the most pesticide exported. So I try to convince Commission to find a way to forbidden that. Because from health, from ethic, for the residue, because it's like boomerang, you see, they come after in Europe with residue in food, and I think that it is not acceptable at all. And I hope this regulation, because you see, Sarah Wiener wants to say, we don't speak about phytopharmaceutic product, we speak about pesticide. We change the word, and it's very symbolic, but it shows that it is pesticide and not phytopharmacology like medicine. It's a product very dangerous. And second thing that I want to say, it's about the report that that comes from European Agency of Environmental. We show the effect on health for the bees, for insects, and so on, and for the farmer, about the disease like neurologic, like cancer, and so on. And they show also that we must change of model. And that is very important to change the model to reduce all these pesticides. Because these pesticides want to kill the life. It's that the problem. They kill the life. It's not only insect, it's bird, it's ecosystem, and after it's a human. So we must be very strict with this subject, and we have to be very courageous, and we are strong to get a good compromise to make an evolution about this regulation. Well, it's my introduction, but you see, I must fight against this pesticide.
Thank you, Michelle. Definitely a lot of points that we're going to come back on afterwards. But for now, let's pass on to Paula for your opening statement.
Thank you, Julia. Sorry. Good morning, everyone. So as you were mentioning, I'm from Copan Cogeca, representing farmers and cooperatives of the European Union. First of all, being very quick, because afterwards we will have a question and answer session, of course. I will want to stress, of course, the importance and how proud the farmers and cooperatives, of course, are as producers of food, feed and non-food products here in the EU that are high quality, safe and nutritious. Just some remarks maybe to introduce us as well the debate today. First of all, and following also the line of Diana, I mean, we all agree on the importance of being sustainable in all aspects and increasing our standards as much as we can. Of course, while reducing the environmental impact of every activity, not just farming, but of course, this is a collective effort of all the industries and sectors. And at the same time, remain competitive and remain, let's say, visible in the international market and in the international context that we live in. But we must as well acknowledge, especially in the current socioeconomic situation, the challenges that we are finding, particularly in finding suitable alternatives for replacing, as Diana was mentioning, the chemicals that we are using, for instance, now, even considering the following of Integrated Pest Management that we are very proud of following as much as we can, considering the tools that we have on the table. In this regard, we also feel that the targets for the use and risk, for reduction of use and risk of chemical pesticides by 2030 are a little bit over-ambitious, especially because considering that we haven't seen sufficient agronomic or scientific justification that can allow us to understand why these targets were set like that in the first place. And of course, they will harm countries that have already made significant progress in reducing the use of these substances. In this regard as well, we feel that it's essential that we strike a balance between sustainability and also feasibility to continue producing and supplying food and agricultural products to our consumers. We feel that there are several parts of the let's say the SUR, the Sustainable Use Regulation, that should be very carefully tackled, and we need to be careful on how these measures become mandatory for farmers. Last but not least, just to mention one concept that we feel that is not the right approach, is the one size fits all. We feel that that is not the right way to reduce the environmental footprint and the use of chemicals and hazardous pesticides, and we need proposals that are realistic and achievable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paula. Definitely raising some issues there that cut right to the chase of what's contentious about this file, the reduction targets, and also how they're measured in terms of the baseline. We're definitely going to talk about that later in the discussion as well. But for now, I turn to you, Martin, for your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Julia, and good morning, everybody. From a civil society perspective, I would say that the level of awareness on the toxicity of pesticides at citizens level is very important in Europe. They are very much aware that there is no safe use of pesticides, that they damage the environment, pollinators, and also health. And I would add to that, and this is not so much known from the public, is that the main victims of pesticide use are farmers themselves, who face an increased amount of a series of pathologies due to exposure to pesticides. So there are big expectations from the civil society to reduce pesticide use. It is very clear. It has been expressed several times We had 2 European Citizens Initiative asking for an important reduction in pesticide use. Recently, a successful one, the Save Bees and Farmers, was presented in the Parliament and addressed by the Commission. There's also the Conference for the Future of Europe, where citizens are asking for a significant reduction in pesticide use. And every year, EU barometers point at the fact that citizens are afraid of the contamination of their food by pesticides. So with this Green Deal, the Farm to Fork, and this proposal for a sustainable use of pesticides regulation, the Commission is showing that the EU is not only about business, but also about protecting health and the environment, which we feel is very good. As it was mentioned earlier by Diana and Paula, there is a need for better crop protection, and there is, and I think it's important to say as well, a reduction in the number of pesticide active substances that are available. The most toxic ones are gradually being phased out from the market, but there are also usually very efficient substances. So farmers need to adapt and change practices. And we feel that this Commission proposal comes at a right time to push and to help in this transition towards integrated pest management, to adapt to this inevitable reduction in number of active substances. And this will continue because still dozens of highly toxic compounds will be phased out from the market in the coming years. Pesticides is a topic that is unfortunately dividing the society, opposing on the one hand farmers and citizens, which I think is really not good. And we hope that this Commission proposal will also help the public having a positive image from the farming community with this reduction in pesticide use.
Thanks, Martin. That's a good message, I think. Okay, then last but not least, let's turn to Jennifer with your opening statement.
Good morning, Julia, and everyone listening, and thank you, Euractiv, for the invitation. So, indeed, I think one area
we are indifferent. It's still Martin talking here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now it's perfect. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I was just saying that indeed, I think there's one area where I'm hearing from the discussion already that we can agree, and that seems to be the importance of some sort of transition in agriculture. And we all seem to want to move towards alternatives, and we want them quickly, but they have to be right for farmers and for food production. So that brings me on to biocontrol, which is indeed an alternative and indeed a game changer with the sustainable use regulation. And in fact, is what we need to make this transition to sustainable agriculture. And I'd actually like to start by thanking the Commission for delivering this important proposal. So biological control is actually identical to nature. It regulates pest and disease control. And just to explain a little, for example, you might have pheromones, where you might have a pheromone that distracts the male of a pest by using a female sex pheromone, and the male can't find the female. And then you have no larva, and then you have no maggot, and then your apples actually have no maggot in them, so they're pest-free. Or you might have an insect that controls another insect. So you might have a lacewing larvae, for example, that eats an aphid. That's what biological control is. And what are the benefits? The benefits, when we think about agriculture, we think about food, plants, crops, productivity, but we also think about soil health, biodiversity, environment, ultimately human health. And all these things are improved immediately if we use biological control. The sustainable use of plant protection products, the regulation, is not just about pesticides, which is chemistry. It's also about biological control. In fact, we need the sustainable use regulation to facilitate the move to alternatives. And without the SUR, the sustainable use regulation, we will not have these alternatives. We actually need to use the SUR to lead the mindset change. We really need these alternatives to help farmers to regenerate their farms. We have a new generation of farmers sitting here on this panel. And they need farms to be productive and farms that are able to manage biodiversity at the same time. This isn't easy. It doesn't just happen. It requires work and knowledge. And what we can do with the sustainable use regulation is move towards that. Thank you.
Thank you. Some fascinating insights there. I didn't know that biocontrol could be breaking the hearts of insects and depriving them of their partners. That's fascinating. Okay, before we jump into the discussion, let's just go over some housekeeping points quickly. Now, this is an interactive event. We want it to be as interactive as possible as well. So please don't hesitate to send us your questions for the panelists. To do this, you can just type them in the Q&A box that you see on the right. And please identify yourself, who you are or who you're representing. And also importantly, please say to whom you'd like to address your question on the panel. And I'll pass on the questions throughout the whole discussion, so feel free to already start asking some questions. I see some people have already started, that's great. And you can also join the debate on Twitter by using the hashtag EADebates. All right, enough of that. Let's jump right into it. And maybe let's start by taking a little step back and talk about why we're even discussing the reduction of pesticides use. So maybe, Martin, you can walk us through a little bit what is actually the impact or the risk of current pesticide use that we have in the EU? Why do we even need to act in the first place?
Right, thank you. As I was mentioning in my introductory remarks, pesticides are being constantly phased out from the market, and often substances that were used for 30, 40 years, they were considered safe. And then the more scientific evidence we have, the more we realize that they are not safe. And in general, pesticides, synthetic pesticides, have an impact on human health and the environment, not only specifically on the pest that they are supposed to destroy. So this is a fact. It's proven by all these substances that are leaving the market, and also by countless scientific publications confirming that the way we produce food currently is not sustainable and is destroying even the pollinators that farmers rely on to produce our food. So the current model of agriculture is unsustainable for health and the environment, but also if you look at, and this is a more general concept, the farming community, the biodiversity of farmers, the number of farms, the number of farmers is reducing. We're losing farms, we're losing farmers because of this intensive model of agriculture that the EU had decided to put us in, and that we really need to transition now towards a more virtuous path.
Thank you. So maybe, Diana, Martin mentioned earlier that pesticides also have a negative impact on farmers themselves, as people and on their yields. So what do you think? Do you think we need an ambitious reduction, or do you think something like the 50% reduction that the Commission proposed would have too much of an impact on yields?
So I'm sorry, I just don't really like talking about numbers. I don't think that the number or pinning down the number is what is going to get us where we actually want to be, which is in a more sustainable way of farming. I agree on everything Martin said, except for maybe one thing. I'm not sure that it's the model that the EU imposed that is reducing the number of farms or making farming not attractive for a new generation that could be or would like to be involved in farming. It's the fact that the profitability of farms due to a number of elements is very, very low. And no young person in their right set of mind would ever walk into a career that has a number of very complicated elements that go way beyond what a normal career could be. I mean, when your boss is climate and Mother Nature every day, you really are the boss of nothing. I think that's already a constraint enough, but then you're also not profitable and you cannot really provide for your families, or you are in rural areas where you're kind of left alone. I would say that's the biggest constraint. So what we need to do, and what I completely agree on, is how do we reshape EU agriculture where we put all of the elements that are necessary. Again, the safety of farmers to me is one of the most important things. So anything we do in order to make sure that we are making farmers work in a safer way, that they are not getting ill because of the products they're using, that they are trained on how to properly use products, that they are trained on what alternatives they could use, that this knowledge reaches every single farmer in every single province of Europe, then that makes me happy. This is how we move forward. And I'm not sure that it's a target towards the reduction of a specific element or a specific, it's not the number that is going to give us the result. I know probably giving a target is a way to move forward in the ambition. I would say that in general, what we need to do is create a new farming community where we can actually, I wouldn't say certify, but for example, make sure that we are professionalizing farmers in a way that also in the way that they do plant protection, they are using the best possible solutions, the least impactful for nature, that this is still making sure that they are achieving excellent yields, that these yields, because of all of that, are being properly remunerated on the market, that consumers recognize the fundamental role that farmers are doing in providing safe food and safe environments for Europe. And then we're all working in a systemic way where sustainability puts farmers and consumers on the same side of a transition.
Okay.
The number is
definitely
kind
gonna
of
talk.
somewhere in the middle, and then we'll see what it is.
We're definitely going to talk about ways to support farmers through the transition as well. But I'm sorry, I do want to stick with the number for a little bit. So Michelle, let's maybe turn to you. Are you worried that a reduction target of 50% could have a significant impact on yields for farmers in the EU?
Well, when I hear you, I want to have a question. Why the farmer don't reduce the use of pesticide during several years? Because it's not today that we know the toxicity of pesticide. It makes 10, 20 years ago. And in France, we have some target from 2018. We say we have to reduce 50%, for example. And it's not the case. We increase the use of pesticide. Alors, what is the problem? It's a problem of knowledge. It's a problem to follow the farmer, to explain that we have to reduce the pesticide and to make sanction. What is the best way? Because I don't believe you now. All the time we say we must reduce and we increase the use. When all our ecosystems are dead, how can we do? And we say all the time, you say the food security in Europe is threatened by a reduction in pesticide. It's just the opposite. We depend on pesticide. We depend on intrant, you see, phosphate and so on. We have a lot of illness because we have resistance against pesticide. You are for the technology by OGM, and we know the consequence about that. How? And I want to know, to Diana and to Paola, how can we change the model of agriculture? what is the obstacle to change the model? Because you see, in France, I know very well the farmer. They are very big farm now, very big, with big tractor, with big material and so on. And they use a lot of pesticide because there is very a few salariés we work with them. And they use a lot of money with the PAC, with agriculture, politique agricole commune. And I don't know now. I don't know how convince agriculture to change the practice. What do you think
Right
about
on
that?
to, yeah, let's
Why
pass the
they
question right on
don't change?
to Paula. I'll give you the chance to answer to that, and also if you'd like to comment on the reduction target and the impact you think it could have, or maybe doesn't have to have on yields.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. Thank you very much for the question. Well, I think there are several factors that we need to consider here. I will address first what Mrs. Rivasi was mentioning all the time. I think that is a very key word for the future and also for the past. It's true that, yeah, well, first of all, we know, of course, that there are substances that are toxic, that can be toxic. We need to also remember one of the main principles of toxicology, that is everything in excess is toxic, even water, first of all. Secondly, on the other hand, everything in the right dosage can be probably well used, and that applies to every substance of every nature. That's just to put some basic principles on the table. On the other hand, I mean, we, from the farmers' perspective, from the cooperatives, we fully acknowledge that, of course, and actually, as Mrs. Rivasi was mentioning, this is not new. I mean, we have a sustainable use directive actually since 2009, and there are some farmers that also have been for generations trying to improve those systems, even through mechanization. I mean, I think Mrs. Rivasi was mentioning the use of tractors. I mean, that was an technological advance at one moment to, let's say, help us well be more efficient in the fields, but also that has developed during several decades. And actually we are now everyone is aiming to use these technologies on these machines for a more targeted application of, not talking about chemicals, about anything that can be applied, even for biocontrol. Probably Jennifer can agree with me on that. We always want to have the most targeted application and the dosage that just the plant need, not just putting pesticides or plant protection products because of reasons, I don't know, because of anything. I think we are all very, very aware of that. I will also subscribe what Diana was saying, that I think training is fundamental. It has existed for quite a while. It needs to keep being there. I mean, and farmers are very aware that they need to be trained. We need advisory services for sure. We need help on that. Of course, we will need probably the help of the authorities to achieve these correct systems, let's say, or have enough people to train other people, and to also encourage and incentivize and explain certain new methods. These new methods, of course, need to be affordable. I think also that answers a little bit the question from Mrs. Rivasi. It's not that we don't want to stop using chemicals. I mean, we use the minimum that we can. The problem, I would say, I think that's the big answer that I can provide, is also, I think Diana mentioned, we don't have enough alternatives that can be safely, effectively, affordably, and and available in the market, that can actually cover the demand and can cover what, let's say, the gap that the chemicals or the hazardous pesticides will leave. And okay, they can leave it, but what are we going to get in exchange, and who is going to help us to get that? I mean, probably there are a lot of ways, institutions, industry. I mean, we all want to collaborate in that regard, but first of all, yeah, we need something that tangible that we can use. And the last remark will be that, talking about the time again, of course, I mean, we have now a proposal on the table that is saying that we need to change and we need to shift and we need to use certain things. But why aren't those things readily available, or there is no legislation that actually provides to be really available in the market? Maybe that should have been done as well 5 or 10 years ago, or considered by the institutions or the legislators. I don't know. The thing is that we cannot just consider certain tools or being finalizing or midterm with certain legislation for certain products at the same time that we are trying to implement this legislation, because that is not going to work, especially in the tight deadline that we have until 2030. I mean, maybe that should have been previewed before setting this legislation, because as Mrs. Revasi was saying, we already knew that there are some things that needed to be improved. Sorry if I extended too much, but I wanted to put it in context. Thank you.
I'm just gonna zoom in on two things that you mentioned, which is the availability of alternatives and also the support that farmers get to implement these. So let's talk about alternatives first with Jennifer, who's the expert on that. So maybe you can walk us through a little bit, how far do you think biocontrol can get us in being an alternative to a 50% reduce of chemical pesticides? Can we make up for all of that with biocontrol? And I also wanted to include a question from the chat, which comes from Jose Maria Castilla from ASAJA, who asks, what do you think the role of biotechnology and specifically new genomic techniques will be in achieving these political and aspirational goals? So maybe you can also comment on that, Jennifer, which is another alternative maybe that is not as organic as biocontrol.
Okay, thanks very much, Julia. On the NGTs, I'll just pass that maybe to Paula, who I think is probably doing more on NGTs than we are in IBMA. But I can talk about biocontrol, if I may. So in terms of biocontrol and what we have, there has been a real challenge in the authorization process for biocontrol. It follows the same process as chemistry, which means it takes a very long time here, 5 to 10 years to get something onto the market. And as I think both Paula and Diana have said, there are not enough of them today. That said, there is a huge amount in the pipeline. And when we look at just what to submit, so just what is available for submission, fully developed, ready to use, we have between 2023 and 2025, 75 new active substances and a further 59 that are extensions of existing uses that are already planned and already available. The challenge then is to get them through the authorization process. And as IBMA, we have been asking for a faster authorization process for biocontrol to allow provisional authorization for biological control, and indeed to allow more facilitated label expansion for biological control. We've also been asking for more resources and experts dedicated to the evaluation of biological control. We have it there. It's ready. The question is getting it onto the market. And then once we've got it on the market, as both Paula and Diana have said, what we then need to do is work together to actually be able to put that into programs and make that work in the field, because it works field by field. So no field is the same in any farm, and how one actually applies the biocontrol, how it actually fits in that particular bit, actually requires a little bit of working with it to ensure that you actually have the optimal results. So in terms of availability, we really are relying on the Commission to speed up the access to market for the active substances that are there in the system or indeed just about to enter the system. In terms of advice and training, we need to work together with farmers and advisors and manufacturers to actually create those solutions in the field. It's one thing to have the product, you actually need to then put it together with everything else. One other point I'd just like to make, if I may, is that this isn't new, the biocontrol. Where it's there and where it's used over huge areas, thousands and thousands of hectares, millions of hectares. And I'd like to just pick on one example, if I may, in Spain, in Albufera, where there's a lagoon in the Valencia Delta, Albufera, and it's about 16,000 hectares. And over the course of 20 years, it has moved completely to biocontrol using pheromones to control the rice stem borer. And this is work between the manufacturers, between the farmers there, with the Valencian regional government, working with advisors. And now people don't use standard insecticides, they only use pheromones. And you've seen a 10-fold increase in the pairs of mating birds in the lagoon. And we've seen a huge impact in terms of productivity, where farmers are able to grow rice in the same levels as they were before, but with the aid of biodiversity. So thank you.
I think you've inadvertently actually already answered a question from the chat, which came from Bill Witz from the Consumer Choice Center, who's saying biocontrol is an interesting alternative to chemical crop protection, but won't you be confronted with similarly lengthy regulatory approval processes that current plant protection products are? So I think you've talked us through that a bit. So let's quickly get back to the NGT question. Maybe I'm gonna have just two short answers on it. I'd say from Martin and Paula. So Martin, maybe you first. What do you think of NGTs as an alternative to kind of cushion the blow of pesticide reduction?
Yes, so I think it's important to not try to replace one pesticide active substance by one approach. This is what we regularly hear from the farming community. If you ban one active substance, give us one solution. It's much more complex than that. What we have to do is to do integrated pest management, is putting a whole set of preventative measures to avoid the pest from occurring. And biocontrol, well, we don't see it now anymore, but it's on the IPM pyramid behind Jennifer Lewis. We see biocontrol is almost the top of the pyramid. And then the last solution is chemical synthetic pesticides. And then about NGTs, from what we observe, we're not experts on NGTs, but what we observed with GMOs that were resistant to pests, like BT maize, is that the pests quite quickly, in just a few years, circumvent the resistance of the crop. So then the industry has to produce a new GMO, and it will be the same with NGT. And then it means that the farmers are again dependent on the seed or agrochemical industry. Generally, it's the same companies. So if we think in terms of allowing the farming community to be more independent with regards to the tools they use, a lot of emphasis has to be given on preventative measures. And for the moment, to our knowledge, there is no pest-resistant NGT that is at a very advanced stage in the companies. Most of them are herbicide-tolerant crops. So once again, it's not so much in the interest of the companies apparently to develop that. And I just wanted to warn you, the experience with the GMOs shows that it's that the pests will circumvent the resistance, and that we need a whole set of preventative measures and not simplistic solutions like NGTs.
Okay, so let's hear from Paula, I think, or would you like to pass on to Diana, who I think also has some things to say? Okay, I'll pass to Paula first, and then you can pass on.
Yes, thank you, Julia. No, I wanted just to mention one thing that caught my attention from what Martin said. I will need to check among my 22 million farmers, maybe who is actually saying that the one-to-one substitution is actually the way, because as far as I know, we have always said the opposite. That and I think integrated pest management in particular is a very good example of that. That actually, as also, for example, DG Agri was telling us the other day, we completely agree that when we have tools at hand, we don't necessarily have one substitution, one candidate for one replacement for the other. Let's say we can have a lot of tools we would love to have a lot of tools available under integrated pest management that we can actually combine and allow the use of chemicals as a last resort, as it is indicated currently in the hierarchy of the integrated pest management, and particularly on NGTs, before giving the floor to Diana. The only thing I will mention, I'm not the expert in Copan Cogeca. I have another colleague that is dealing mostly full-time on that. But we feel that it's a potentially good tool, let's say, based on science. I'm not going to enter into the debate of the GMOs or non-GMOs. Our feeling is that it's not a GMO, but I'm not sure if it's. We can spend hours discussing probably about that. The thing that we see is that, of course, as every other tool, as I was saying before, it has its pros and cons, and that needs to be carefully assessed, put in a legislation, and regulated adequately, so to ensure that the use is safe, that the consumption is safe, that everything is as it should be to protect everyone and provide high quality products. But yeah, please, Diana, the floor is yours.
If that's okay, yes, I will just add a little bit onto that, because we have discussed NGTs quite extensively in CIJA. I don't believe, and we don't believe, that NGTs are going to create the magic seed, the one that you plant that and then you don't have to do anything and everything will be it'll be solved. It is one instrument that fits in a more general farming management that needs to be also aiming towards sustainability. When it comes to the industry has not developed at this moment, especially for the European market, seeds that work also on plant protection, because there is no market. Why would we develop seeds if we don't have a market where to sell them? And in the rest of the world, they can sell GMO seeds, but they are also selling NGT seeds and doing a lot of field work in that. And from a lot of the research that I have done, where NGTs are also applied and integrated into, for example, regenerative agriculture practices, no-tilling, the results that can be achieved, even when it comes to the use of pesticides, are incredible. You can start using only biopesticides, and that is the system that we need to be aiming at, knowing that we will have, for the diversity of farming that Europe requires, a complexity of answers. And if science is giving us a possible new tool to add to our toolkit, I really feel that we should be enabling the system to do so, instead of fearing that it's not going to solve everything. Of course, it's not going to solve everything. There is nothing that is going to solve the complexity of this problem with one snap of the fingers. But the more we add in to the opportunities that farmers have, the more we can actually enable them to go towards a transition.
Thank you. Thank you. Some interesting insights, definitely. So let's, you already mentioned it earlier, Diana, the support for farmers in making the transition to or away from chemical pesticides rather. So Michelle, maybe let's turn to you. We have a question from the chat from Corrado Finardi, who asked, where will be the money to fund the finance in the transition? IPM, so integrated pest management, and more skill-intensive practices require money. So what do you think? Where could money come from to help fund this transition? Could it be the pesticide tax that your party colleague Sarah Wiener also proposed?
Just I come before about OGM or NGT. Warning, warning, warning. Because you believe I am scientific. And when I hear you, you believe that is extraordinary to have NGT seeds or before it's OGM seed. Is the same. You have NGT seeds resistant to pesticide, or you are NGT seed who produce pesticide. So it's the same for the people, for the biodiversity, for the environment. No, I don't believe that the technology can resolve all the problem. Bon, that is the first thing that I want to say. Second thing, it's about how can we help farmer to make transition. And you see, Sarah Wiener proposed a tax to help to make transition, because we have the same thing when you are in conventional process and we want to go to organic process. You have some years and it's very difficult for the farmer. And I think it's good to propose tax and also to push each member state to take in the pack second pillar to help this agriculture. You see, it's not too white, too black. We must find together a transition, and we must help the farmer. But the solution, for me, it's also in the chain of the production. You see, you have big industry on pesticide, and there is a link with, we say in French, cooperative. And it's a cooperative, we sell seeds, we sell pesticide, we sell phosphate, and so on. And so the farmer is like that. They can have another way to follow what the cooperative want to sell to him. So we must cut that if we want to reduce and if we want bring some advice to help the farmer. So, at your question, there is a tax for the farmer to make transition. It's a proposition of Sarah Wiener.
Okay, thank you. Let's maybe turn to Diana. What do you think in terms of funding? There's out there the proposition of a tax, as we just talked about. There's, as Michelle also mentioned, the Commission's approach, which is to propose to member states that they take money from the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy. But a lot of people also say that the CAP already has a lot of things on its back, so to speak. It already has a lot of functions to fund. So what do you think, where should funding come from? And also maybe what should be done with it? What would actually help farmers?
I would say that the CAP already has a lot to fund and a lot that needs to be funded, where pest management is one of the elements in which we are kind of still behind and where we need to do, where of course we need to advance. There's probably maybe one thing I have managed to agree with Michelle about is actually that the need for independent consultancy is very important. Historically, the people who train farmers, the people who tell farmers what to use, are the people who are selling them the products. And this, of course, creates a conflict of interest in which we can agree that it's probably not the most, the method or the methodology that is going to give us the best optimal solution. So even the opportunity of thinking that we need to be able to train independent bodies and we need to train and give farmers knowledge on what they are using and how they're using that independently from the people who are actually selling the product, I think is very important. Using funds from the CAP means stretching a budget in which farmers are already struggling and that has already been reshaped quite a bit in order to improve the sustainability of farmers. In the eco schemes already, we have some schemes that actually work in such a sense. but I don't believe that this budget is enough. So because this is a huge transition, and because this is a transition from which then really our food systems depend, because if we don't help farmers transition, then we will not have a food system, because there is no food system without farmers. Then I really believe that we need to start thinking a little bit outside the box on how we, as a society of whole, can make sure that this transition is just, really manages to reach every single farmer in Europe. I believe that there is space for all farms, small farms, big farms, family farm, corporate farms, cooperative farms, but that every single one of them needs to be given all of the tools that they need. So larger farms will have a greater capacity of investing. Smaller farms that are struggling with generational renewal will need a certain type of investment. What we need to make sure is that we're holding the farming community strongly together, because it's the only way that we can ensure food security.
Thank you. Yeah, interesting point that you mentioned also, that it's not just about funding, but also about support in terms of consulting farmers on which approach to take, or maybe how to shift away from chemical pesticides. Jennifer, what's your experience with this as kind of the other side offering alternative solutions to pesticides? Is there a need for more independent consultancy for farmers who want to switch to these things?
I think there's certainly a need for independent consultancy, yes, for certain. That said, I also think we have to recognize that the manufacturers are often the people who know their product best. So they are important in giving advice. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. When you decouple advice and supply, yes, you're stopping any sort of inappropriate advice that there might be, if I were to say it like that. But at the same time, you may not be allowing that knowledge, real product knowledge, to be accessible to the farmer. So my sense is that we actually need both, that we need to have independence that people can go to and say, right, well, this is absolutely independent, a bit like if you think financial services, then you're not going to buy financial services necessarily from the person who's actually selling them for a company. So there's that independence is very important, but at the same time, ensuring that we've got the immediate product knowledge about how something and the mode of action of it and how it actually works is also available to farmers. So we need to ensure that we actually have both those elements in the equation. I think if I can just touch on innovation as well, and how we actually manage these sort of the funding. How do we actually manage this transition in terms of funds? Because as everyone says, the cap is already pretty full up and spent. So I think there's an element in when we look at what next and sort of R&D funding, that instead of looking too much at the what, there is a lot of what there already. What we need to look at is the how. So how do we actually put all these things that we've been talking about together? How do we do it on the farm, in the field? And as you said, Diana, can we just not touch every farmer? We should be touching every farmer. But the only way one does this is with actually farmer to farmer networks, because a farmer actually, in my experience anyway, learns by looking over the hedge. He talks to the guy next door, the next door village, the next door farm, mum and dad, the brother, the cousin, whatever. The chap is known in the distribution for the last 40 years. That's how it works. That's rural life. That's not just farming, that's rural life. And we need to engage with that. And there's a very good example that organic farming uses. And there's no reason why we can't learn from this for all farming, where I think they call the group Innovative Farmers, I think is what they call the group. It's sitting in the UK, but there's no reason why there aren't. I'm sure there are lots of them all over the place. But in this particular group, what they do is they take a problem. So one of them says, I can't grow my maize in this particular soil or whatever. And then they look at it together, and they come and then maybe have 10 of them together with a university usually, plus maybe a distributor, a couple of manufacturers, and they look at the problem. They say, okay, what can we do? And then they try it out in their fields, and then they look at it again. And so it's actually a sort of iterative process on the farm with people who understand it, working together. And there's no one saying, oh, you must do this or you must do that, because actually they're trying to work the answer out together and collectively come up with something that really starts to work. And then all those people learn at the same time. And that's also really encouraging. The advisors get better as well, because the advisors learn from what's happening on each farm. So do the researchers. And then they're going to research something that's actually even more useful next time. So I think this interaction of people and actually using this innovation funding, but instead of using it necessarily for the what, let's start using it for the how, because it's the how we need. We have the tools in many cases. Yes, we have to get them authorized and we have to look at policies, but that's fixable. That is actually fixable if there's really a political will to fix that bit. But what we really need time and money focused on is actually what's in the field, because you only get one crop a year. You only get one season. And if you miss that season, you've lost the whole year. It's not like any other business farming. You get it once a year in this Northern Europe anyway, in Northern Southern Europe. So actually you need to use that year every single year. You can't waste a single year. So we need to be putting that practice and how to do it. We need to put that in place now with innovation money. Thank you.
Thank you. Some interesting insights there into how rural life actually works on the ground. I think also important to remember in these kind of Brussels-based discussions. Martin, I was wondering about your take as well on funding and support for the transition. Switzerland, for example, has introduced a program through which farmers receive financial compensation for a certain percentage of reduction in the use of pesticides. So a certain amount of financial aid is tied to a certain reduction of pesticides. Could this be a good model for the EU or EU countries as well? Or is it too kind of focused on incentivizing the reduction and not focused enough on supporting actual alternatives? What do you think?
Yes, I think it's a good program. We have to see how it is funded. It can be funded by a pesticide tax. In Denmark, for instance, there's a pesticide tax already for many years. It's working well. The most toxic pesticides are taxed more heavily, and this helps farmers, directing farmers towards the less toxic solutions. And such a program is good. I think it's good to reward farmers for reducing pesticides. On the other hand, I wanted to, and now I'm taking my scientific hat, to stress that there's a breadth of publications in the EU and also a series of examples at farm level showing that you can reduce pesticides without significant reduction in yields, and also without a reduction in farmers' profitability. I think this is very important to say because here, from what I hear here around the table, we need money to support farmers, but the first beneficiaries of reducing pesticide use is farmers for the health part I already mentioned, but also for their profitability. Pesticides are costly, and in many cases, and we speak with farmers regularly, pesticides is also an insurance for them. There's this fear that if you reduce pesticides, you will reduce your profitability, but it is not necessarily the case. It is knowledge intensive. I think we all agree here about that. But per se, there are already a lot of alternatives available, and many of them are let's say, independent from the industry. You know, longer term crop rotations, including more diversity of crops and so on. But it's also to the benefit of the farmers' financial situation.
Thank you. I'd like to include some more questions from the chat. So there's one to Michelle, and there's Michael Clark asking, do you think there's a risk that the legislation is pushed back indefinitely, given the tone from the current Agrifish Council yesterday, so the meeting of EU agriculture ministers, where they talked about yield drop, about food security concerns, and if not, what timelines do you expect for the approval and the adoption of the legislation? Maybe I can just add from my side, are you optimistic that we're going to have this legislation before the upcoming EU elections next year?
Alors, The Commission and the European Parliament speak a lot for this legislation. The problem is the member state. You have speak about that. I hope that we can find a compromise, a lot of compromise to make succeed of this regulation, because it's a way of the future. You see, when we have voted the cap, the Green Party are not very happy because the cap is not in line with Green Deal. The vote of the cap is not in line with biodiversity. It's not aligned with to support a transition of agriculture. So this text, if we succeed to find in the trilogue where there is Council, Parliament and Commission, we succeed to have a good trilogue, to find a good compromise to reduce pesticide, to help the farmer to be in line with green gas and so on, and climate and biodiversity and so on, it's a good thing. But actually, I am not very, very sure, because some member states are very against this regulation. Because you see, in France, when we have the problem of S-metolachlor, you see, it's a pesticide, it's an herbicide, and the agriculture ministry push the French agency to not ban this pesticide. It's incredible. It's a politic against science. If we see that, you understand why member states are not very for the transition. So it depends of the politic position of member state and member state and the European Parliament. I hope so, we succeed, but now I am not sure.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Some like mild optimism there, I'd say. I take one last question from the chat and ask for a very short answer from Martin. There's Marie-Cécile Damab, who's asking, aren't pesticide alternatives more than biocontrol products, but also agronomical practices, precision farming, plant breeding, biostimulants, and biofertilizers? Maybe you can comment on that very briefly.
Yes, I think we already discussed this and also agreed with the farmers around this table that it's much more complex than just biocontrol. It's a lot of preventative measures, building fertile soils, crop rotation, using resistant varieties, and so on. So it's a whole complex system, and this is where clearly there's a high need of investing money in providing high-quality independent advice to support and reassure farmers in the transition, because this is one of the most challenging parts of the SURE proposal.
Thank you. That was very efficient. Okay, I'd like to use the last few minutes that we have to do a quick wrap-up round, and kind of ask each one of you very briefly, like 30 seconds per person, I'll say. So I'll keep it short because we only have a few minutes left. But I'd like to ask everyone, let's say a genie or your wish grantor of choice came and granted you one wish for this SUR proposal, the Sustainable Use of Pesticides proposal. Anything that you could include or scrap from the proposal, you have one wish. What would it be? What would you like to see? If it could be anything. So Michelle, maybe let's start with you. What would you like to see in the proposal? Can you hear me well? Michelle?
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat the question?
I was asking if there's one wish that you have. You have one wish for what would you like to have included or not included in the SUR regulation in the end? What would be your wish?
I would like that all the farmers are in organic way, because for me the future is the future for biodiversity, it's future for health, it's future for the climate. So the agriculture must be organic now.
Okay, that was brief. So the genie is flying to Diana next. What would be your wish?
As an organic farmer, that not be granted, but putting on just my CIJA hat, that that farmers are provided with viable, reliable, and affordable solutions. We want to achieve a transition to more sustainable plant protection, but we need to make sure that the solutions are accessible on all markets, that they are reliable in the sense that they actually are effective and can help us in what we are trying to achieve, and that they are affordable so that they don't completely turn over the profitability of the farm. So I would say that would be my triple wish in one.
Thank you. Yeah, well, genies do grant triple wishes usually, so it's not far off. Paula, let's turn to you next.
Yes, I will be very quick as well. I think my or our biggest wish from Copan Cogeca in this regard will be that this regulation, if we are required to do some reductions, adaptations, that these adaptations that we are required to do are as well sufficiently adapted with a good scientific basis to national, regional, or even farm realities in the EU.
Okay, perfect. That was very brief. So Martin, let's turn to you next.
Okay, so I will say two. One for the health and environment perspective is that I think that even the Saravina proposal for 80% reduction in the most hazardous pesticide is not enough. It should be 100. It's only a group of 40 substances that are extremely toxic and that according to EU law should already have been very much phased out from the market since 2015, and member states do not respect this part of the regulation. And the second is to have a more ambitious and more obligation for the member states to have really high-level farm advisory services with more relations between countries and also at regional level to really adapt it to the pedoclimatic conditions. I think this is really a key to the success of this SUR.
All right. Yeah, I think 100% reduction pesticides for hazardous pesticides is probably something that you would need a genie for it to happen. But I did say you have one, so that's a good wish. So yeah, last but not least, let's turn to Jennifer.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Two wishes, if I may. The first is that we have a definition, a legal definition of biocontrol, because if we have that in the SUR, we can actually use that to actually speed up authorization of this group of products to provide those alternatives to farmers. And the second, I'd like us to focus on the positive targets. Why not focus on the positive targets for biocontrol? They're indicative positive targets in the SUR. Let's get behind those. Let's provide the expertise. Let's provide the advice. Let's get the advisors working together with all the other practices to actually make positive targets instead of worrying about what a reduction target might be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to everyone. So we're almost at the end. It's just left for me to thank all the panelists for the very interesting and lively discussion. And also a big thank you to the audience for your interest, for coming, and for all the questions in the chat. I do have to say it was a particularly active chat today with lots of interesting questions. And sorry if your question couldn't be included. Of course, at Euractiv in the future, we'll keep you updated on everything on the SUR and everything agri-food otherwise as well. So follow that on euractiv.com. And yeah, I'll see you next time, and I wish you a nice day.